We're very fortunate today to have Chief Justice Michael Heavican with us. Chief Heavican has served as the Chief Justice of the Nebraska Supreme Court for some 10 years now. We were just laughing. I told him I was going to tease him. He likes the number 10 because he served as the Assistant United States District Attorney for the District of Nebraska for 10 years and as the Lancaster County Attorney for 10 years. Justice Heavican is currently standing for reappointment as Chief Justice of the state of Nebraska, and hopefully we'll get 10 more years of him on the bench as Chief Justice Heavican. Chief.
Thank you, Chris. I can almost assure you there will not be 10 more years. Great. Well, I appreciate it, and this is an intimate audience, so I will be quite informal and open to questions. Actually, you can ask questions while I'm speaking, or hold off until I have finished. Just as a kind of overall background of things. The Supreme Court in Nebraska and in most states is in charge of not only hearing the appeals that come from the local courts, the local trial courts around the state, but also administratively responsible for the court system in the state as a whole. So we have over about 120 or 130 or so judges around the state of Nebraska. We've got judges that serve all 93 of our counties. We have employees in all 93 of those counties. All of the county court clerk's offices in Nebraska are ultimately employees of the Nebraska Supreme Court, excuse me, as well as all of the probation officers. So we have over close to 1,200 employees now around the state. And we've grown a lot in the last couple of years, and that is largely because probation is expanding and expanding greatly, expanding rapidly. And so I will start off by talking a little bit about juvenile justice, one of the areas where the court has expanded, or probation, part of the court has expanded tremendously. Until about 3 years ago, juvenile justice supervision in Nebraska was the responsibility of the Department of Health and Human Services. And at that point in time, the legislature decided that probation should do supervision. Now, what do I mean by, excuse me, what do I mean by supervision? Our juvenile courts across the state have essentially three kinds of jurisdiction. First of all, they handle abuse and neglect cases in Nebraska. So if you've got children who are being abused and neglected by their parents or their guardians, that is likely to end up in juvenile court. And many of those problems trace to substance abuse and or mental health issues. So typically the situation that you have is parents who are substance abusers or have mental health issues in some way. So the court is there to protect the kids. The kids are often moved from their homes into guardian situations or into foster care kinds of situations. Nebraska has an inordinate number of kids in foster care. So we've worked really hard with the Department of Health and Human Services and everybody else involved to get that number down, and that has happened at least a little bit. Other two jurisdictional areas for our juvenile courts are status offenses. Those are juveniles. They may be something as relatively simple as truancy, which accounts for a lot of those folks, but it also may be kids who are ungovernable in one way or another. Their parents can't take care of them, so they go to the court for help. And again, those are often situations where the child or children may have mental health or substance abuse issues. These are often young people in their teens, nearing adulthood. The other area where probation has greatly expanded is juvenile justice. So if you have kids who are lawbreakers, and that may include anything from something relatively simple again, like shoplifting or some minor thefts, or perhaps a DUI, something like that, all the way up to situations involving loss of life, homicide. Now, many of the more serious crimes that might be committed by juveniles still end up in adult court, fittingly so. But the bulk of offenses that are committed by juveniles are handled in our juvenile courts. The idea behind juvenile court involvement with these young people is not to punish, but to rehabilitate the kids. And as I said, until about 3 years ago, supervision from the juvenile courts was handled by the Department of Health and Human Services. That is now handled by probation, a part of the court system. So our budget has increased dramatically in that area, some tens of millions of dollars, because we not only had to add approximately 200 new probation officers, but we also, in our budget, have all of the rehabilitation expenses. So if we've got kids who are in foster care, that has to be paid from our budget. If we've got kids who need mental health treatment, that comes from our budget. If we've got kids who need substance abuse treatment, that now comes from our budget. And some of those items are very, very expensive. If you've got young people, for example, who are in long-term care, institutionalized in long-term care, that is a big ticket item, and hence the very large increase in our budget in those areas. And this led to some immediate, I will use the word confrontation with the legislature about the amount of money that we were spending. And our side of that story is that the Department of Health and Human Services never budgeted in a way that they really knew how much money they were spending on juvenile justice. So they couldn't tell us when the transfer was made, and the budgeting process was not really properly done. We weren't funded properly to begin with. We also, we got a little bit more funding to handle the situation, and we also have done a better job now of anticipating what costs are going to be and ways that we might be able to do some kinds of things in a less expensive manner. So we have, I think, are doing now a much better job of spending the money that was budgeted for us. So we feel a lot more comfortable with the juvenile justice supervision than we did when we initially took over those responsibilities. And the idea in probation was that we would deliver more of those services at home, and that we would more fully involve the families of the young people who had broken the law with their rehabilitation. The Department of Health and Human Services made all of these kids wards of the state, which on the one hand made it much simpler for the department to do certain kinds of things. They made all of the decisions instead of the parents. They didn't have to go to the parents for permission for anything. That has now dramatically changed. As I said, we think it's good to involve the family. So any kind of treatment and so forth has to involve the family and family permission to do certain kinds of things. And it has to, in something as simple as truancy, it has to involve the family and the family structure in making sure that kids are attending school and making sure that if they are attending school, that it is a positive experience for both the kid and the families involved and the school. So that is the philosophy, and those kinds of things are a little bit difficult to measure, but we think it's working and working well, so that we are going to be able to have young people, more young people who are indeed contributing positive members of society rather than the approach that was used earlier, which isn't to say that every juvenile that we handle will be a success, but that is our ultimate goal, and we think we are moving positively in that direction. So we are looking forward to fine-tuning that relationship that we have with the juvenile courts and with juvenile justice. And part of that is one of the reasons that you folks are all here today and involved in your careers with juvenile justice. One of the things we really need to do with that program is measure its successes, measure its failures, and make sure that we are always trying to do things that improve the process and again improve lives for the kids that are involved in the juvenile justice system. Now, one of the payoffs of that, if we do a good job with juvenile justice, one of the big payoffs is we have fewer people in the adult criminal system, because it is pretty easy to predict, and I think you folks have measured that people who are involved in the juvenile justice system are the folks who are going to end up in the adult criminal justice system too, unless something as successful is done in the juvenile justice system. So we really think that there are some possibilities there that have great promise for not only individuals but for the state as a whole, so that and for the criminal justice system, so that we have to spend fewer resources in the adult criminal justice system too, which is a good entree to what probation is doing in the adult criminal justice system. We have also very much expanded in that area. Again, the legislature gave us some responsibilities that might otherwise have gone to the Department of Corrections or to parole. So we are trying to do some of the things we are doing in juvenile justice in the adult area. To begin with, over the last 10 years, really, this started before I came on board, but accelerated most recently in the last 2 or 3 years. We have tried to set up programs that are conducive to community corrections and that give our judges in the adult criminal justice system options other than sending people to prison. Now, I think you all know that Nebraska is at the point where either another large another large penitentiary, another large confinement facility has to be built, or the current facilities have to be greatly expanded, or people have to be diverted from the system using some variety of community corrections. And I always credit Ellen Brakowski, who has been the head of probation for the courts for the last 10 years, with sort of sticking to the whole concept of community corrections when it was not very fashionable to do so. About 15 or 20 years ago, Kermit Brashear was first the chair of the legislature's Judiciary Committee, and then he was Speaker of the Nebraska legislature, and he worked a lot on the whole concept of community corrections and was a leader in that area and could foresee the huge costs that were coming down the pipe if something wasn't done about it in Nebraska. After he left the legislature, that got much less priority from either the governor's office or from the legislature, and didn't really resurface as a priority again until about 2 or 3 years ago, when it became obvious that a new facility had to be built or something had to be done. In the meantime, Ellen Brakowski, as I said, persevered in the whole concept of community corrections. So she had started a number of what we call day and evening reporting centers around the state of Nebraska, Lexington, Omaha, Lincoln, Nebraska City got an initial one in Sarpy County, and so forth. But they were limited in number. They are financed partially by the state, but also by the local counties where they are located. As all of probation is sort of a shared fiscal responsibility. But those day and evening reporting centers were in place in key areas. And what happens in a day and evening reporting center? This is a location where people who are on probation can come and get various rehabilitative services that they may need. So if they need to search for jobs, there are job folks who can help them find jobs, the needed computer facilities and so forth, counseling, drug rehabilitation. The counselors come to those locations. So this becomes a sort of one-stop shopping center for somebody who is on adult probation supervision. We all know these folks very often do not have the kinds of basic skills that one needs to be a functioning, positive member of society, and things that we take for granted, like structuring our day or finding a job, are things that are difficult for folks who have drifted, shall we say. So the day and evening reporting centers are very much designed to make this rehabilitation process as easy as possible for these folks, who often also don't have resources, automobiles, cell phones, all of the kinds of things that you might need to get a job and get to the job and those kinds of things. So we think that the day and evening reporting centers have been a success, and the legislature decided that they would greatly expand those. So we now have them in basically all of Nebraska's major regional centers: Scotts Bluff, North Platte, Columbus, Norfolk, South Sioux City. We opened new centers in both Omaha and Lincoln, so that both of those cities have at least 2 day and evening reporting centers, and likewise Beatrice, Nebraska City, Lexington, Kearney, Hastings, all now have day and evening reporting centers. Idea behind that is judges have more options and are more comfortable in using the option of community corrections. And likewise, probation has set up, in particular, programs that are helpful to and successful with folks who have long-standing substance abuse problems. Probation put together a program they call SAS, which stands for something like substance abuse, really tough people to handle, or something like that. I don't have all those initials down just correctly, but the program is designed to take people who would otherwise go to prison, who've had chance after chance, and this is an option that judges can use, and very much it is an option that I have heard graduates of this program say, I couldn't imagine, I couldn't believe the judge took a chance on me, but the program literally was successful, and you hear many of the same kinds of things that you do from drug courts, and I'll talk about drug courts in a minute, is that this program saved my life. We have a great record of these folks holding down jobs and, again, as I said, becoming productive members of society. So, message here is, thanks to Ellen Brakowski's leadership and the leadership of her executive staff, they were doing a lot of things while nobody was paying much attention or giving them much funding that have come very much now into vogue, and the legislature is much more interested in funding, so that we have these programs going around the state of Nebraska. Lots more people using the community corrections option, and again, I think we're showing some positive accomplishments. Let me say a couple of things about specialty courts, particularly drug courts in Nebraska. Again, these go back probably 20 years now. They started off just by individual judges getting grants in Lincoln and Omaha and Kearney, and we're not getting much attention, but showing some success. Gradually, when the federal grants money ran out, everybody had to turn to the state for funding. So those programs now are largely run by probation, staffed by probation, funded by the legislature. There are drug courts across the state of Nebraska, everywhere from Scottsbluff to, of course, Omaha, and most of the major communities in between. All of our judicial districts have at least one adult drug court now, and the legislature made a commitment. We made sure that they passed a statute last year allowing for the possibility to expand those specialty courts. Big thing at the moment is veterans courts. A number of states already have these. They are very popular. Obviously, politicians love the concept of veterans courts, of course, until it comes to spending for them, but they make a great photo op when they are kicked off, because we've got a lot of veterans who have come back in recent years who have, again, the same kinds of problems that we see with juveniles and so forth, and that is substance abuse and mental health issues. So these courts are designed, again, to not punish people, but to rehabilitate them. And so we're going to see veterans courts kicked off in Omaha in just a couple of weeks, and here in Lincoln very soon thereafter. So again, these are community corrections options that the legislature has now found that they might be interested in funding, and we are interested in working with also. But it has meant that adult probation has expanded some more, tens of millions of dollars more. We've hired more adult probation officers. And part of the scheme that the legislature came up with is that even low-grade felons who are sent to prison for 1 or 2 years, these are the folks who are most likely to come back out into the community. Obviously, they're almost 100% of them are coming back out. So they very often fail almost immediately when they come out of prison because they're not on parole, they have no supervision, no help in finding jobs or housing or any of those kinds of things. So the probation, or the legislature set up a reentry program similar to what is done for higher grade felons who come out and are on parole. But these folks aren't on parole. They are sentenced to time for reentry at the time that they are sentenced to prison. And probation is doing supervision on these reentry folks. Now, we've never done reentry before. Probation was always an option available to judges. And as I said, we tried to make it more usable for judges over the years with the day and evening reporting centers and so forth. Probation is involved in all of those specialty courts. But now probation is doing something a little bit different. People who have been institutionalized and are now returning to the community. So this is a first for us. And we approached it, at least some of us approached it with a good deal of skepticism. But again, probation has risen to the occasion. We've hired a lot of new probation officers, and we are up and running and ready to go. These folks who are on reentry supervision will have access to our day and evening reporting centers, and we are trying to put together specialized programs for them so that they have all of their reentry needs met. And we have folks who are in the institutions, probation officers who are in our adult institutions, and they are a little bit like the greeters at Walmart. They meet with these folks, they know exactly when they're going to come out, and the idea is that they have a game plan for each of these individuals. So that's up and running. Now, one of the things we have to do is make sure that our judges are comfortable with this and that they are doing their part in this reentry supervision, because the judges are supposed to be directly involved with this too. This is a new thing for the judges. Some of them, I think, are taking to it well, and others perhaps not so much. So we have a pretty intensive education program with that. Now, this takes a lot of judge time, and we have been warning the legislature about that too. Particularly, it's going to take a lot of judge time in Omaha and Lincoln, and those are our very busiest judges, particularly in Omaha. They are probably underjudged, if you will, at the moment. So adding more responsibilities there will likely mean that we're going to have to expand the number of judges in that particular area. We have not done that recently, but their caseload is significantly higher than the caseload for most of the rest of the jurisdictions in Nebraska. And earlier this summer, in June, they had 41 first-degree murder cases pending in Douglas County at that point in time, because as you know, Omaha in the last couple of years, not so much this year, but in 2015 had a horrendous number of homicides. So there are only 16 district court judges there, so you can see that they not only have a lot of numbers, but they have difficult cases to deal with. With 16 judges, that means at least each of those judges has at least 2 homicides on their dockets. That compares to outstate dockets where it would be extremely rare if you were a district court judge that you ever had a homicide case in your entire career to deal with. Just an observation on the kinds of resources that we're going to need there. So this would be a good time to ask folks if you have any questions about either the juvenile justice system or the adult criminal justice system, its relationship to probation and to the courts at this point in time. I feel like I should be walking out in the in the audience here. Okay.
So you're talking about the reentry programs and like how probation are starting to do that reentry.
Right.
Now, do you think that Nebraska will ever move to have probation and parole be in the same department ever? Because I know some states have moved into that direction. Do you think Nebraska would follow suit within the next couple of years?
Wow, what a prescient question. I'm sure that is going to be an issue that comes up. And frankly, the reason why these low-grade felons reentry was given to probation, I believe, is because we had really gone, and probation had gone over the last 10 years into an evidence-based system where probation officers are not folks who are just sitting at a desk somewhere and the probationers come in and report every Thursday or Friday, whatever, and end of story. The whole concept behind evidence-based probation is that officers are much more proactive and that there are many more requirements and supervisory elements to the probation job. Parole had not really progressed to that point. So I think the legislature felt that even though parole was, I think for most of us, the obvious place to put this supervision, I think the legislature had more confidence in probation. What I would say in answer to your question is I'm not sure where the legislature would go, but obviously there are reasons why both parole and probation shouldn't be working very closely on reentry, and we've tried to do that with the Department of Corrections because they're the third players here, and with parole, and I think we have a reasonably good relationship with those folks, but I do see them maybe not merging, but becoming much more closely intertwined in the sense that they'll be working together.
Great, thank you.
Very good. Good question. I see a future probation officer out there. Okay, other questions at all there?
Thank you for coming, Mr. Chief Justice.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, as you move to this new model, what are the different skills that probation officers need to have that maybe they didn't have so much of before?
I think just a much better, and I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but a much better educational background and a much better a much better knowledge of how you measure success or failure with these people on an individual basis, and really some good practical experience on how people work and how people function, but also a good academic experience in that area too, because you have to work with these folks on a day-to-day basis, and they are, when I see you have to work with these folks, I mean you have to work with probationers on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of those folks are supremely manipulative and have learned how to play the system for years, and you have to be able to, I think, have a good psychological background and able to understand those kinds of things. And then you need good practical experience. So that is very important. You have to be much more technologically skilled than you were 10 years ago, because many things are done remotely now, just so that more people can be reached. When you talk about rehabilitative services, for example, in greater Nebraska, there are no support resources there. There are no psychologists. There are no drug counselors in many parts of the state. So we've had to turn to long-distance services in those kinds of areas. So those are some of the things, and hugely you have to be, you've got to have an attitude that you want to be deeply involved with these people, and you're willing to spend the time and effort, late at night, weekends, all of those kinds of things. Probation is no longer the office job where people come in and report to you. So, yeah. Okay, other questions and comments about?
Thank you for joining us, really appreciate it. My question builds on one of the points you said about measuring individual success of these clients. And I wonder if you might not speak to us a little bit about your experience and knowledge on a specific aspect being employment of folks either coming out of facilities or on probation as one success indicator, but even more specifically, what, from your view, might be barriers or challenges that these individuals face?
Okay, well, starting with barriers and challenges, as I said, lots of these folks don't have the basic skills that we take for granted, which for literally everybody in this room is when the alarm clock goes off in the morning, that you get out of bed and you shave and you do all of the other things that you need to do to prepare to be at work at 7 or 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Now, for a lot of the folks you'll be working with probation, to begin with, there won't be an alarm clock, and let alone some effort to get up and make some kind of a deadline to be at a job, to dress appropriately, just those basic kinds of skills. So you really have to understand that a lot of the things that you take for granted in your life, you were young people successful enough to get into college, the older folks here successful enough to actually teach in college. That means that you have a lot of planning skills and a lot of things that folks who have ended up in institutions or in trouble with the criminal justice system largely just do not have. So you have to be able to work with those kinds of things. And then I think we have become and will become more so, ever more sophisticated about knowing when the crucial points are in the careers of individuals who are on probation. So when do we have to be there specifically to intervene? When is the right time to make sure that the probationer doesn't leave a job or miss a job interview? All of those kinds of things that they initially need some help with, but at the same time balancing the idea that at some point in time you have to take the crutches away or the training wheels away, and these folks have to be able to do it on their own. So those are incredible skills that take very special people to do with very good training from institutions like the University of Nebraska. But that's the sort of thing that I think we have to become ever more sophisticated with. Okay, any more questions about juvenile justice or adult criminal justice? There are other aspects I want to talk to you about. What kind of time do we have, Chris? Till 1 o'clock. So I'll go on to a couple of other areas where the courts have also expanded a bunch. One of those is public guardian. Now, in Nebraska, we were apparently the last state in the United States to get something called a public guardian. What is a public guardian? Well, oftentimes, particularly with the elderly, but also with some people with handicaps who are much younger, they need to have they need to become wards of the state in the sense that they can no longer make decisions for themselves in regard to their health or their health care. They can no longer make decisions for themselves in regard to their property, their finances, that sort of thing. From my standpoint, the most simple example of that is people get old, they get senile, eventually they can't take care of themselves. Now, many people fortunately have families who will come to their rescue, if you will, take over the finances and watch after the elderly in their families. But lots of folks nowadays don't have families, or the situation is too complicated for the families to handle, so they have to go to court to get a guardian or a conservator who is someone who makes these decisions for the elderly person or the disabled person. And this can get really very complex. And what has happened over the last decade or so, guardianships are handled in our county courts around the state of Nebraska, and the number of folks seeking guardianships, largely because the baby boomers, obviously I'm one of those people, more and more baby boomers coming along, so this is being driven by population, demographics. More and more people need guardianships. And our judges over the years have gone to, they need to find somebody to be a guardian. Now typically that is family first, friends of individuals, lucky lawyer sitting in the back of the courtroom, maybe the local banker, if it involves money and so forth. But our judges increasingly ran out of people who were volunteering for those jobs or being coerced into taking these jobs. And also On a more unfortunate note, we had a number of instances where guardians for pay were abusing their wards and stealing from them in a large way. Now, I don't know if you've noticed the World Herald, which I think is really not a bad newspaper, and they're doing in the last few days a huge expose on Goodwill Industries in Omaha and the huge salaries being paid out to their management folks. Well, we had those kinds of stories about guardians a few years back in two incidences, one in the Omaha area, one in Scotts Bluff, but they both made great fodder for the front page of the World Herald, and rightfully so. These things should be exposed, and we should never have ever gotten into situations where these abusive guardians were in place, stealing lots of money from their clients, and in some cases being physically abusive to the clients too. So that is why states have public guardians, and the good side of the abuse situations that arose was that the Nebraska legislature decided to fund a public guardian program in Nebraska, albeit on a very small scale. And they chose, rather than to put that into the Department of Health and Human Services or some standalone agency, they chose to put it in the courts. Now, I'm not a real big fan of expanding the court system, either with probation or with this public guardian business. So I was skeptical, most especially about this. But again, we found a great person, Michelle Chafee, to run that program. She's brought it up from scratch. We've got a public guardian and associate public guardians, about 10 or 12 of them around the state of Nebraska. They have taken on some of the most difficult cases that our judges couldn't find anybody to work with or work on. So I think that program is also working very well, and we are becoming more sophisticated in anticipating where we're going to run into problems with guardianships around the state, largely again because Michelle has become a very well versed and an expert really as to what's going on with guardianships in the state of Nebraska. So message there is courts have also taken on this program, and the courts have really expanded both budgetarily and with the number of folks who are employed by the courts expanded greatly in Nebraska in the last 5 years. So I hope we are a dynamic part of state government and really of service to everybody in the state and beyond even. We are not just 130 judges. We are much more than that. And all of these programs, probation, public guardian, and so forth, which arguably are executive branch functions, are with the courts. And one of the really good things about that is that we can, they all serve our judges in one way or another, and beyond that, citizens. And we can, I think, respond to problems a lot more quickly than perhaps some of the executive branch agencies could. And we think our management system in place for both probation, the public guardianship program, and so forth are really pretty good, and we're really doing some very good things. I want to mention just one other thing before we wrap up, and that is technology. Technology is a huge part of what everybody is doing really everywhere in the world. I'm sure here at the university and any job you have in the private sector, you have to be utilizing technology and using it well. Well, the court system is just an ideal place to use technology and use it well, even though lawyers and judges resist change incredibly, and for many of us, technology is truly a challenge. But to the credit of a lot of folks in the court system, we're one of the few states that has a statewide case management system here in Nebraska, and we did that with considerable struggles. What typically happened with computers in the state court system over the years was individual locations would start their own computer system, and you have a hodgepodge of things going on before the state unified court system would step in and say, well, no, we really all need to be on the same system. We need to be measuring the same things, and people need to have access through this computer system so that they can not only access Scottsbluff or Hastings or Lincoln, but they can access the whole state, which is now what we have. The last big link in that was Omaha in Douglas County, which had its own system and resisted change. They did not want to be part of a system with everybody else for multiple reasons. But we won, so that they are now part of the same system as everybody else. Well, this is a huge advantage to us in being able to have accurate records and keep track of what's going on in all of our courts around the state, and giving access to ordinary citizens and lawyers, the people who have to use the system day in and day out. So you no longer have to go down to your local clerk's office and check out a file of paper, stacks of paper everywhere. If you go into any of our courthouses, there's paper everywhere. Well, that is changing greatly. You can now see the files in your home, in your office, 24 hours a day. And e-filing is not mandatory yet the way it is in the federal court system, but we are within a year or so of that, and a huge percentage of our cases now in both our district and county courts are filed electronically, and of course that's where we want to be. We will never be a completely paperless system, but we are moving in that direction very rapidly. So I'm very proud of what we've done there. We did not have any expensive consultants come in and do this. We did not buy services from expensive folks who do these kinds of systems for some other states. We brought this up. We developed it ourselves. We have responded year in and year out to various judges and lawyers and so forth who have suggested changes so that it is always more and more usable for us. So that's a huge part of moving the courts into the 21st century that again, excuse me, that I'm very proud of and that I think we're moving very much in the right direction there. And as I said, e-filing will be mandatory within the next, probably the next year or so. So there we are. Okay, questions about anything else here? Chris?
All right, I guess we're good. I might mention to students who are here, we have internships in the Office of Information Services, CJ interns, Criminology Department, in trial services, and also in the Office of Public Guardian. So our students are helping out there
Great.
in the Supreme Court
Great.
chambers, and those are options that you will have if you'd like to do some things there. I thank you most kindly. We're an intimate group here today, and you're all invited to partake of some punch and cookies, just Heritage, catty corner right there. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.